Hello guys, welcome to the next session of developing e-commerce application from scratch using Angular and Spring Boot. In the last session we discussed on how we can show my orders to the user. So in the last session we discussed on how we can add one new section for the user where user will be able to see his or her order. So this is the my orders section that we have added. So whenever user will click on this button, then user will be able to see all the orders that he or she have placed. So this is the table that we have added in the last session itself. Exact similar table we are going to add for admin as well. Only difference is in this table, in this my orders section, user is able to see only his or her orders, but admin will be able to see all the orders. So it will be the exactly same that we have that whatever we have done in the last session itself, but there is a quite like there is very small change that we have to implement in order to do this. So if you have the knowledge, you can just try to do it by your own, and you can just try to skip this session, or else we can just try to do it together. Again, to achieve this functionality we need some changes at the back end, and alongside we need some changes at the front end. So in this session I'll just show you how we can do the backend changes. So in the backend we have to create the new API and we have to like fetch all the data. So we will do that API in this session, and in the next session we will see how we can do the UI changes. So first of all, let me just take you to the IntelliJ, and over here let me just take you to the order detail controller. So this is the API that we have added in the last session itself, and if you just see, this API is accessible only by the user. Exact similar API we have to add, and if I just show you the API that we have created in the last session, then if you just see over here, we are just trying to fetch all the order details by the user. So this is how we have implemented the logic in the last session. Now if I just go to the order detail controller, let me just add one new API. So let me just make it as a public. Then as of now, let me just keep it as a void, and then get all order details like this. And then over here, this API is not going to take anything as a parameter, so we have to make it as a get mapping. So let me just make it as a get mapping. Then we have to generate a path. So let me just use get all order details, something like this, and we have to make it accessible only to the admin. So we have to use @pre-authorize, then we have to use has role, and then we have to make it only accessible to the admin, something like this. Now let me just save these changes. Now let me just go to the order details service, and we can just try to add the like service layer method. So if I just go to the order details service, then we can just add one method over here. Let me just make it as public. As of now, let me just keep it as a void, and then let me just give the name as get all order details. And then over here, only thing that we have to do is we have to just make it as order detail DAO dot find by or find all. So we have to make it as a find all over here, something like this. And now we have to return it as it is, something like this. Now over here, if you just see we are getting the error because we are just trying to return some collection over here, but over here we have used a return type as a void. So we have to change that return type. So we have to make it as like return some iterables. But over here, instead of returning the iterable, what we can just do is we can just try to return a list. That will be a good idea. So what we can just do is we can just first of all create one list over here. That list is of order details. So let me just make the type of order detail list. Then let me just give the name as order details, and let me just initialize it with the empty array list, something like this. Now let me just remove this return, and then what we can just do is we can just try to let me just do one thing. Let me just use for each over here, and then what we can just do, we can just use lambda expression. So we can just use order details dot add, and then we can just add our x over here. So this is how we have to use the lambda expressions. And if you just want to know more about the lambda expression, you can just try to watch my this particular session by clicking over here. And lastly, once we added all the items into the order details, lastly we have to just to return, and we have to just make it as a order details, something like this. And now over here we are just getting the error. So let me just use the return type as list of order details, something like this. Now if I just come to the controller, then over here what we have to do, we have to just use return, and then we have to just use order details service dot get all order details, something like this. And again we are getting error over here, because from here we are just trying to return the list of order detail, but we have mentioned the return type as void. So let me just make it as a list of order details, something like this. Now let me save these changes and let me just restart the application, and let's see what happens. We can just try to test this application from Postman, and if that works fine, then we can just we will just see in the next session like how we can take a look to the UI side as well. So as of now I'm just getting some exception over here. So let's see what is the exception that we are getting. So if I just go to the top so that I can see the exception message. Okay, so over here the exception message is, let me just try to find it out. Okay, so it is saying that include using final class or non-visible class. It is saying that illegal argument exception. Okay, so I think what we have done is, yes, so over here it is giving the exception at this has role admin. So over here we have missed the ending single quote. So let me just give it and let me just restart the application. Let's see what happens. And yes, so this time application started successfully. Let me just do one thing. Let me just copy the API name and let me just go to the Postman. Let me just use localhost 90:9090 and let me just paste the API name, which is get all order details. The get mapping is get mapping, so let me keep it as it is and let me click on send button. So as of now we are getting it as unauthorized, because this API is basically accessible only by the admin. So we have to pass a JWT token as well. So let me first of all generate a JWT token for admin. So let me just make it as admin123 and admin@pass. So this is the API that we have to use for login. So let me click on send button. So now we have received the JWT token. So let me just copy this token and let me just try to go to the headers and let me just add authorization and let me just add bearer. So this is how we have to add the JWT token. We have to give, or we have to type bearer and then we have to give a space, and after that we have to paste the JWT token. Now let me click on send button. Yes, now we have received all the order details. So it is a list and we have over here we are able to see all the orders which are placed. So there are multiple orders which we have already placed. That is the reason we are getting this particular list over here. So I hope you got an idea around this, like how we can create the API for the admin so that we can return all the order details. In the next session I'll just show you how you can use this API and show these details on the UI side as well. So I hope you enjoyed this session and I'll see you in the next session.